Hi, Harold Hansen here with Healing Free Dog School. On this video, you're going to learn how to avoid or overcome 7 common mistakes that we make that teach our dogs not to come when we call. Now, there are obviously steps that teach the dog to come when we call, but on this one, we're just going to learn about the 7 that I can think of and what we can do about them. The first one is, remember, your dog is always learning, whether you know you're teaching your dog or not. So if your dog is in the backyard and you call the dog and your dog ignores you, what's your dog think? I don't have to come when I'm called. So what we want to do, instead of calling the dog off leash and teaching the dog that come means absolutely nothing, what we want to do instead is use what I refer to as a throwaway word or expression. The one I use is come here, not come here, but come here. Or you could say, let's go, or in the house, or something like that. You could say it a number of times. Your dog may do it, may not. It doesn't really matter. You're not teaching the dog to ignore your official word, dog come, which should only be said when you have a leash on and can get the dog to do it. This brings up our second mistake, and that is when the leash is on and we are teaching the dog to come when we call, we don't want to start with it tight before we say the word. Now, you are going to have the leash on and you are going to tighten it so that after you say the word, so you can get the dog to come in and praise your dog for coming in when the dog hears the word come. But the smart thing to do is to loosen it up a little bit before you call the dog. Now, if your dog is on a tight line and pulling, and what you can do to relax the leash is step in, the leash is a little bit loose, call the dog, and then gently pull the dog in and have the dog come in. So what you're doing here is you're teaching the dog you have to come when you're called, even when the leash is loose. So that's a real important thing. The next thing that we're going to work on is a very important emotional issue. This is something that we often kind of fall into the trap of, and that is scolding our dog for coming back when we call. We think, well, who would do that? Well, let's suppose your dog runs out the door, runs down the street, almost causes a traffic accident. You're very upset with the dog, and you finally get your dog to come back to you, and then you scold the dog. What's your dog learned? Running down the street was fun. Coming back, I got scolded. That's not fun. So what we want to do with that one is change the expression forgive and forget to forgive but remember. So if your dog outsmarts you in a situation like that, don't just let your dog outsmart you every day by running down the street and then you get them back, I've got to praise you because you came back, which you should. But what you want to do instead is set up the same situation, but have a line on the dog. Let's say your dog jumps out of the car. What you can do is you can have your dog in the car, close the dog's leash on the door, in the door, and then when you open the door, you have control. So if your dog comes bailing out, your dog's not going to be able to get very far. So remember, forgive, but remember, set the dog up so the dog doesn't keep outsmarting you. Now, the next 4 things that we're going to deal with are things that we do that actually, usually with the leash, and there's one other something we say, and these are things that we do that actually teach the dog to ignore us because the dog knows the leash is off. The first one is the sound of the snap swivel. A lot of us will walk the dog around, and then we go to a park, we take the leash off, and the dog hears the click, and the dog knows I'm off leash, I don't have to pay attention anymore. We're going to show you how to redo that. The second one is not only the sound of the click, but also the fact that you take the leash off, the dog hears the sound, plus the dog feels the leash is now slack, or there's no tension, and then the dog sees the leash being thrown out. So in this one, your dog hears the click, feels the leash loosening up, and sees the leash being thrown out in front. We'll redo that one. The next one involves the collar. And I fell into this trap when I first started training. And that is, you walk the dog around, you do your training, and then at the end of the training, you take your dog's collar off, and your dog thinks, now I'm off leash, I don't have to mind. The fourth one is kind of a fun one. It's something that we do, and that is we say a panic expression or word. The G-rated version is, oh no. This is the one that tips your dog off. I'm definitely off leash. So what you can do with this And this is typically something, for example, if you see your dog near the door is open, you know your dog's going to run out the open door, you're behind the dog and you're not going to be able to catch the dog before the dog gets out there, you typically say something like, "Oh no!" So we're going to work on the panic word too. So let's jump back and start taking care of these last 4 problems. The first one, the sound of the snap swivel, what you're going to do with that one is you're going to have your dog on your left side and you're going to be holding the leash in your left hand and passing it behind you so your dog can't see it or smell it or feel it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to reach down with your right hand and you're going to snap the snap swivel, but don't take it off. Your dog thinks, "I heard that sound, I'm out of here." If your dog stays there, be sure to praise your dog. If your dog jumps up and starts running away, you can stop the dog because you still have the leash on. The second one is a combination, and what this one is, again, the dog hears the sound, feels the tension being relaxed, and then sees the leash coming off and being thrown in front. So what you're going to do with this one is you're going to get a second leash. We're going to call this one our backup leash. This is the one we're going to be holding behind us. So what we're going to do is we're going to get our decoy leash, a second leash. We're going to have that in our right hand. And so you have your dog here like this. And what you're going to do with this one is you're actually going to snug this up a little bit. And then as you reach down, you're going to snap the snap swivel of your decoy leash while you still have this one on. And then as you do that, you're going to relax the tension on your backup leash. This way your dog thinks, "I heard the sound, the leash is loose now or not there, because I can't tell because I don't feel a tug," and you throw the leash out in front and your dog thinks, "Now I'm really off leash." So what you can do is you can practice this one working on that combination of the 3 factors: the sound of the click, the feeling of the leash being relaxed, and the fact that the dog sees the leash coming off. If your dog stays there, be sure to praise your dog. If your dog jumps up and starts running off, you can stop the dog because you still have the leash on, don't you? The third one of this series is the 2 collars. What we do here is we have one collar on the dog and we put a second collar on. And what we do is we're holding on to our backup leash and we're passing it behind us like this, making sure it's nice and loose. And what you're going to do is you're going to slip the second collar off and throw it out in front of the dog. Your dog may think, "Hey, you took my collar off, I'm out of here." Well, no, you're not, because we still have the backup one on. Then the smart thing to do is to put your second collar back on, hook to it, and take the first collar off. Do all the combinations. Some dogs will think that's the real collar. When I worked with my Dobie on this one, what I did was I had 3 collars on. I had a soft collar and I had 2 training collars. I took one training collar off, threw it down, he ignored it. Took the second training collar off, threw it down, he ignored it. Put the second training collar back on again, took a soft collar off, and he thought, "That's the one that means I'm off leash." So I had to teach him, "No, you're still here and you're on the leash. No matter how many collars come off, you're still here." The other thing that we can do is if you don't have a second collar, you can take the end of your leash like this, fold it against itself, and create a loop. One size fits all. You slip it on your dog's head, you slip it off your dog's head, and if your dog jumps up and starts running away, you can stop the dog. If your dog remains there, then you praise the dog for staying there when your dog thinks the collar is off. Now, finally, we're going to talk about our panic word. The way you can do the panic word is set the dog up and practice panicking, doing it for these 3 things we just covered. So you can have the leash behind you, you can snap the snap swivel, and then go, "Oh no!" Your dog thinks, "I know what that means, I'm out of here." No, you're still here. Then you can do the combination one where we have both the feel, the sound of the snap being released, and the sight of the leash coming off. Use your panic word. "Oh no!" Dog thinks, "Oh, my leash fell off." Great. And then you can do the same thing with the collars. You can slip a collar off the dog and then go, "Oh no!" Remember, we want to fool our dog into thinking, even when we act like we're panicking, we still have the line on, "You can't run away." The only time not to panic is if you do a click clunk. What the click clunk is, and this happens occasionally in class, we'll have a dog's sitting there will reach down and we'll do the click trick, and then accidentally someone has taken the leash off, and as they stand up, the leash actually drops down, hits the floor, and they hear a clunk. If that happens, don't panic. Keep your calmness, reach down, and simply hook your dog back on. Now, people will ask, how long do you have to do these things? A lot of it depends on how much we've practiced teaching the dog the wrong things. If you've had a dog and the dog has heard the word come for 2 years and ignored it, you're probably going to have to do a lot of training. You might even think of starting out with a fresh word. Some people will say, you know, I'm not going to use the word come because I've already ruined it. If, on the other hand, you haven't really said that when the dog is off leash, your dog is going to learn, I have to come when I'm called. So it depends, again, if you've taken your leash off a lot and thrown it out and your dog runs away, you may have to do a little bit more work to overcome that. So we've covered the 7 mistakes that people make. The first one, again, is what? Calling the dog off leash, not being able to follow up. The second one is what? Calling the dog when the lead dog knows the leash is on by tension. The third one is scolding the dog for coming back when you call. Don't do that. The fourth one was the sound of the snap swivel clicking. The next one, the fifth one, was that combination of the sound plus the feeling that the leash is relaxed plus the sight of the leash coming off and being thrown on the floor. The sixth one was the 2-collar thing, where the dog thinks, you took my collar off, now I'm really off leash. And finally, the panic word. So I want you to work on these skills and overcome these problems. If you haven't dug a hole with these problems, don't. You'll be smarter and know better now. I want to thank you for watching. I'm Harold Hansen with Healing Free Dog School.